Welcome to the deep dive, where we dig into stacks of sources to give you the core insights without the heavy lifting. Now think about this for a second. You made a big decision, real commitment to yourself. Maybe you're finally stepping away from a habit, one that just wasn't working for you anymore. Or maybe you're building something new, a healthier routine. You're feeling good about it, strong, clear, proud even. But then, well, life happens, right? You end up in a familiar place. A party, maybe family dinner, or even just scrolling online. And suddenly there's this nudge, a comment, maybe a shared memory, or just the vibe of the place. And that old pressure starts creeping back in. Sometimes it's subtle, sometimes not so subtle. That feeling of being pulled back, that little voice saying, just this once, it can feel overwhelming, like it could undo everything. So today our mission in this deep dive is to really get under the hood of that feeling. We want to peel back the layers on those psychological forces, the ones that make us surprisingly open to social influence, especially in those moments where we feel vulnerable, when we're trying really hard not to slip back into old patterns. And we're not just here to point out the problem. We're going to build what we're calling a psychological shield. Think of it like your personal defense system against, well, the subtle art of persuasion. For this deep dive, we're leaning heavily on Robert Cialdini's classic work, Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. He brilliantly lays out these 6 universal principles, the things that get people to say yes. But we're not stopping there. We'll also weave in some really key insights from Leon Festinger's A Theory of Cognitive Dissonance. That's a big one. Plus, James Clear's super practical Atomic Habits, and even Skinner's Beyond Freedom and Dignity, alongside some other crucial psychological texts. Our goal for you is to give you the tools to recognize these persuasive tactics when they pop up, and sometimes people don't even mean to use them, right? And then to help you develop assertive ways to respond, ways that protect your choices, your recovery, without necessarily pushing away the people you care about. So are you ready to understand those unseen strings of influence? And maybe you'll learn how to snip them when they're not serving you. Let's get into it.
It's really fascinating and honestly sometimes a bit unnerving how these principles Cialdini talks about just work almost on autopilot. They're like these deep-seated shortcuts in our thinking, often running completely below our conscious radar, steering our decisions in ways we don't even notice. So for anyone who's actively trying to change a behavior, anyone working hard to stick to something new or hold on to a victory over an old habit, well, understanding these isn't just interesting. It can literally be the difference between staying on track and sort of unconsciously giving in to that pressure. These aren't just theories, they're really the mechanics of how we respond socially.
That's a really key point. It's not just about willpower, then. It's about understanding these almost programmed responses we have. So Cialdini's 6 big ones, these universal levers of persuasion are consistency, reciprocation, social proof, authority, liking, and scarcity. Now, while all of them can definitely play a part for our deep dive today, focusing on resisting that social pressure, avoiding relapse, we're really going to zoom in on social proof, liking, and authority. These tend to pack the biggest punch in those social situations that challenge our new habits. But importantly, we'll also spend some serious time on consistency, and we'll touch on reciprocation too, because they're super relevant to that internal and external kind of tug of war we often feel. Okay, let's start by looking inward first, at that really deep need we all have for consistency. Cialdini says it's incredibly powerful. And we're going to connect this directly to Leon Festinger's work on cognitive dissonance, because really, these 2 ideas are like 2 sides of the same coin when it comes to keeping us on track or pulling us back.
Right. Festinger's core idea, which he developed way back in the 50s, is actually pretty elegant. He said that we humans strive for consistency. In our beliefs, our opinions, our actions, we want them to line up. It's fundamental. And when there's a clash, an inconsistency, what he called dissonance between 2 or more of these things in our head, it creates this psychological discomfort. Don't just think of it as a mild annoyance. It's more like an internal alarm ringing, this really unpleasant tension that our brain is basically wired to get rid of. So that discomfort motivates us. It pushes us to resolve the inconsistency somehow, to get back to that feeling of mental harmony. For example, say you choose one thing over another, like one job offer over a different one. You'll naturally start emphasizing the good things about the job you picked and downplaying the good things about the one you rejected. You might even actively seek out articles or people who confirm you made the right choice, and you'll tend to avoid information that might make you second guess yourself. It's this powerful, often unconscious drive to keep our self-image consistent and our mind at peace.
Okay, so if I've decided, let's say, to stop drinking, that's now my firm belief, my new behavior. But then I walk into a party, and literally everyone is drinking, laughing, having what looks like a fantastic time. That creates a huge clash, doesn't it?
Hmm.
My new belief, I don't drink, bumps right up against the social reality. Everyone here is drinking and they seem happy and connected because of it. So that's the dissonance firing off, that uncomfortable mental alarm. And Cialdini's consistency principle, it sounds like it builds right on top of that.
Hmm.
He says, once we make a commitment, even a tiny one, we feel this pressure, both internal from our own desire to be consistent and often external from how others see us. Pressure to act in line with that commitment. It doesn't have to be huge, right? It could be just saying something out loud, or maybe stronger if you write it down or tell everyone. The more effort we put into the commitment, the more public it is, the stronger its grip on our future actions.
Exactly. And this is where the connection to relapse gets so personal and often so tricky. Think about it. How might our past behaviors, the very things we're trying to leave behind, act like a kind of commitment? A commitment to our old self, or maybe to a particular group of friends. Imagine someone who for years was always the fun one, the life of the party, known for always being up for another round. That identity, that pattern of past behavior, it's a really powerful form of commitment in itself. It's a cognitive element that really resists being changed. So when you then try to adopt a new identity, say someone who prioritizes health or someone who doesn't drink, you're setting up this massive internal battle, and often an external one too. The mental effort needed to reduce that dissonance, the clash between the old commitment and the new one, can be huge. Because Festinger pointed out, the more important that old identity or opinion was to you, the greater the dissonance, the greater the discomfort when you face disagreement. And that disagreement can come from inside your own head or from people who knew the old you and maybe subtly pressure you to go back. You're not just changing what you do, you're trying to rewrite your own story, your self-concept. That's a deep, deep challenge.
Wow, that really shifts the perspective. It's not just about the action, it's about who we think we are and how we think others see us.
Hmm.
And this internal pressure cooker just gets turned up way higher when we add the social element, which Festinger also talked about, right? He noticed that our social groups were actually a huge resource for reducing that cognitive dissonance because we naturally seek out confirmation from others for our beliefs. We look for people who agree with us to kind of shore up our decision, to add more constant cognitive elements, basically. Finding more reasons or people that make our choice feel right. And this actually shapes who we talk to and what we talk about. When we're feeling that dissonance strongly, we tend to gravitate towards people who already share our view. We're seeking that validation almost instinctively.
Precisely. And Festinger observed something else really interesting. Making decisions as part of a group often leads to bigger behavior changes than making them alone. Now, it's not necessarily because groups magically have more willpower. It's because of the increased dissonance created by making a commitment together. If you make a pact with friends, maybe you all agree to train for a 5K, or the whole family decides to cut back on junk food, the pressure to stick with it and the discomfort if you let the group down is way higher than if you just decided on your own. But here's the flip side, and this is critical for our topic. If the norm in your social group is the old behavior you're trying to change, well, the pressure to conform is immense. You're trying to reduce the dissonance between your newer chosen behavior and the group's established way of doing things. And remember, Festinger said the magnitude of dissonance from disagreement increases with the importance of the opinion or the group to you. So if fitting in with that particular crowd really matters to you, the internal conflict you feel when you stick to your new habit while they do the old thing, it's going to be incredibly intense. It's a constant battle between your personal choice and your need to belong.
You can really picture it, can't you? This internal landscape constantly trying to find balance, striving for consistency, wanting to belong, and how our friends, our family, our social circles can either be this amazing support system or, unintentionally, a huge source of pressure pulling us back. It really drives home that it's not just about having strong willpower. It's about these deep psychological forces interacting with our environment. It makes total sense why just saying no can feel so incredibly hard sometimes. Okay, so we just explored that powerful internal gravity, consistency, cognitive dissonance. Now let's pivot. Let's look outwards. How do other people, subtly or maybe not so subtly, nudge us towards certain actions? Especially when we're trying so hard to stick to new habits. This is where those external pressures really kick in. Social proof, liking, authority, and yeah, let's not forget reciprocation.
Right, and this is often where we feel that discomfort most sharply in the moment. The big question becomes, How do we navigate these strong social currents? How do we hold our ground without feeling like we're constantly fighting everyone? Or worse, pushing away people we actually care about, maybe even our support network? It's definitely a delicate dance. And understanding these mechanisms, these principles, is absolutely the first step towards finding that balance. It helps us respond thoughtfully instead of just reacting defensively.
Absolutely. Okay, let's start with social proof. Cialdini calls this the everyone else is doing it effect. And it is incredibly potent. It works because it taps into a fundamental mental shortcut we all use. When we're unsure what to do, especially in confusing or new situations, we look around. We look to see what other people are doing. We figure out what's correct or appropriate by seeing what others think is correct. Think about choosing a restaurant in a town you don't know. You almost automatically lean towards the one that looks busy, right? You just assume, subconsciously, well, if all these people chose it, it must be decent. It's a heuristic, a mental shortcut that, honestly, usually serves us pretty well, saves us time and thinking.
But the connection to relapse here is crystal clear. And yeah, it can be devastating. If you find yourself in a social setting where the old behaviors are just the norm, maybe it's a group of friends who always used to finish the night with shots or stay out way too late or binge on pizza every Friday. In that context, social proof makes doing that old thing feel like the right thing, the normal thing, maybe even the expected thing. Imagine you're the only one at a party holding a water bottle while everyone else has wine, laughing, and seeming really connected. The unspoken message is powerful. Alcohol equals fun. Alcohol equals belonging here. Jonathan Haidt's concept of heidishness is relevant here too. He talks about how humans evolved to form these tight-knit groups, almost like bees in a hive. Now, this hivishness can fuel amazing things: cooperation, bravery, selflessness. But the flip side is it can also drive intense conformity. When we strongly identify with a group, we often unconsciously mold our behavior to fit in for the good of the hive, even if that behavior goes against our personal goals. So if your hive's main activity involves that habit you're trying to break, the social proof is overwhelming. Resisting makes you feel like an outsider, maybe even like you're disrupting the group's harmony just by being different.
That's such a crucial point. The very glue that holds groups together can sometimes trap us in old patterns. And then there's the principle of liking. Well, this one feels almost unfair because it plays directly on our basic human need for connection and acceptance. Simply put, we are way more likely to agree to requests from people we know and like. Seems obvious, but the mechanics behind it are interesting. What makes us like people? Cialdini points out several factors, but similarity is a huge one. We just instinctively warm to people who seem like us. He talks about an experiment where people asking for donations on a campus got way more yeses if they were dressed similarly to the students they approached like. More than two-thirds agreed versus less than half when they were dressed differently. In another study, anti-war protesters were much more likely to sign a petition from someone who looked like them, without even bothering to read the petition first. It's almost this automatic click-whir response, as Cialdini calls it, a shortcut our brain takes.
That's exactly right. And it's not just about deep similarities like shared values. Even really superficial stuff can boost liking and compliance. Cialdini gives the example of car salespeople. They're often trained to find little commonalities. Maybe they spot camping gear in your car, or golf clubs, or a sticker for a sports team you both follow. Then they'll casually drop into conversation how they also love camping or golf or that team. It creates this instant, maybe slightly manufactured feeling of connection and similarity. And that subtle boost in rapport makes you like them more, trust them a bit more, and ultimately makes you more inclined to say yes to their offer. It neatly sidesteps our critical thinking by appealing to that feeling of connection.
And you can immediately see how this becomes a massive obstacle when you're trying to avoid relapse. Imagine a good friend, someone you genuinely like and have history with, who knows your old habits. They say, oh, come on, just have one. For old time's sake, remember how much fun we used to have doing this? That pressure, coming from friends or family you truly like and care about, who are engaging in those old behaviors, becomes exponentially harder to resist. That deep desire to keep those social bonds strong, to be seen as part of the group, not difficult or judgmental, and to avoid any hint of rejection, can be such a powerful force, subtly pushing you right back toward the very habits you're fighting to leave behind. It's woven into the fabric of our social lives.
Which leads us neatly into the next principle: authority. We tend to be heavily influenced by requests or suggestions from people we see as authority figures, or even just experts. And it's not just about official titles like doctor or CEO. Authority can be conveyed implicitly through clothes like a uniform or an expensive suit, or even just by someone acting like they're in charge or know best. B.F. Skinner actually touched on this in Beyond Freedom and Dignity. He talked about how social rules and commands like don't steal get their power from the consequences, the contingencies associated with them. Often that's punishment. But Skinner noted that the prestige or authority of the person giving the command can also strengthen its hold. This isn't just about laws, it applies in smaller social groups too. Think about a respected elder in a family, or a really charismatic leader in a friend group, or even just someone with a dominant personality. They can wield significant, unspoken authority, shaping what's seen as acceptable or unacceptable within that group. Skinner might even call this a form of aversive control, if going against that figure leads to social disapproval or exclusion.
That's absolutely critical when we talk about resisting relapse pressure. If someone you perceive as having authority, maybe it's an older friend you've always looked up to, a mentor figure, or just that really dominant personality in your circle if they endorse or encourage the old behavior, their suggestion carries enormous weight. Remember the Stanford prison experiment. Zimbardo described how one guard, Hellman, who had this dominant presence, heavily influenced the other guards to become more punitive. His perceived authority, even in a simulation, shaped the group's behavior. So in real life, if a figure like that says, don't worry about it, have a drink, or one cigarette won't hurt, refusing them can feel incredibly difficult. It can feel almost like you're being defiant or disrespectful, challenging their status. It taps right into that ingrained tendency we have to defer to perceived authority, sometimes even when our own gut is screaming no.
And just quickly, before we talk about building the shield, let's touch on reciprocation. Another Cialdini principle that trips us up all the time. It's that simple, but incredibly powerful human urge to repay favors. If someone does something nice for us, gives us something, we feel this deep, often unconscious sense of obligation to give something back.
Right. And how does that play out in relapse situations?
Oh, very subtly, but effectively. Imagine you're at a gathering trying to stick to sparkling water. Someone comes up, maybe someone you don't even know that well, hands you an alcoholic drink and says, "Hey, got you one, my round." Or maybe, "I brought the special wine, you have to try it." Instantly, you feel indebted. You feel the social obligation to accept the gift, even if it's something you're actively trying to avoid. Refusing feels rude, ungrateful, like you're rejecting the person, not just the drink. This reciprocity rule is so fundamental to social harmony, it's one of the toughest to push back against without a clear plan. We're just wired to return favors.
Okay. Wow. So we've really mapped out these powerful forces, haven't we? The internal pull of consistency and avoiding dissonance. And then these external pushes from social proof, liking, authority, and that feeling of obligation from reciprocation. Understanding them is huge. That's the first step. But now the big question. How do we actually build that psychological shield? How do we arm ourselves against these pressures, the subtle ones and the not so subtle ones that can derail us? How do we become, the architects of our own behavior instead of just getting swept along?
This is exactly where knowledge turns into power, right? When we can actually apply it. And yes, we absolutely can develop strategies, proactive, thoughtful strategies to recognize these tactics, intercept them, and assert our own choices. And importantly, do it in a way that doesn't necessarily mean burning bridges or pushing people away. It's about finding that sweet spot between protecting ourselves and maintaining connections. It's about being strategic, not just reactive.
Okay, let's dive into those strategies. Where do we start? Maybe with the internal stuff first. Reframing our own story, building a stronger identity.
That's a great place to start. Let's talk about reframing your narrative and cultivating what you might call a growth identity. James Clear, in Atomic Habits, has this fantastic insight. What you crave is not the habit itself, but the change in state it delivers. This is so crucial. You don't actually crave the cigarette. You crave the feeling of relief it temporarily provides, maybe the ritual of taking a break. You don't just want to watch TV, you want to feel entertained or relaxed to escape boredom. Understanding this difference is key because it lets you decouple the behavior from the underlying need. Then you can consciously reframe things. Instead of thinking, "Oh, I have to avoid donuts," which feels like deprivation, you could try reframing it as, "I'm choosing to fuel my body for sustained energy," or "I'm investing in my long-term health." You shift the focus from loss to gain, from restriction to positive choice.
That makes so much sense. It changes the whole feeling around it. And Clear also talks about identity-based habits, right?
Exactly. He pushes us to ask, who is the type of person I want to be? And then to make choices that align with that identity. This resonates perfectly with Festinger's consistency principle we talked about earlier, saying I am a healthy person or I am a non-smoker is fundamentally different psychologically than saying I am trying to eat healthy or I am trying to quit smoking. The first is a statement of identity. The second is a statement of struggle. When you frame it as identity, every healthy choice you make becomes a vote confirming that identity. It builds internal consistency. This also connects beautifully with Carol Dweck's work on the growth mindset. Her research showed that students who believed intelligence could be developed, that neurons could grow, were much more persistent when facing challenges. Applying this to behavior change means seeing challenges and setbacks not as proof that you're inherently bad at this or incapable, fixed mindset, but as opportunities to learn, adapt, and get stronger. Growth mindset. You believe improvement is possible through effort.
It's like building that internal resilience first, that belief in your own ability to change and grow. And having an optimistic outlook seems like it would fit right in here too.
Absolutely. Daniel Goleman discusses this in Emotional Intelligence, and Martin Seligman's research on learned optimism is key here too. It's about how you explain setbacks to yourself. An optimistic person tends to see bad events as temporary, specific to the situation, and changeable. A pessimistic view sees them as permanent, pervasive, and due to personal flaws. So, if you slip up on your new habit, instead of thinking, see, I knew I couldn't do it, I always fail, the optimistic reframe would be something like, okay, that was a tough situation, I wasn't prepared for that specific trigger, what can I learn from this so I handle it better next time? This allows you to bounce back. You see the slip up as a data point, not a definition of who you are. It's crucial for staying motivated over the long haul.
Building resilience from the inside out. Okay, but we know the environment plays a huge role too. So what's the next strategy? Tackling our surroundings.
Precisely. The second key strategy is to master your environment and consciously reduce your exposure to triggers.
And how does that work in practice? Is it just avoiding certain places?
That can be part of it, but it's often more subtle. James Clear's inversion of his first law of habit change is brilliantly simple. Make it invisible. This means actively redesigning your environment to remove the cues for your unwanted habits. If you're trying to eat healthier, don't keep junk food easily visible or accessible in your kitchen. Maybe put it on a high shelf, or better yet, don't buy it in the first place. If you want to reduce phone usage, don't just silence it, put it in another room when you need to focus. Make the temptation harder to act on. This lines up perfectly with Skinner's point that all control is exerted by the environment. He even controversially suggested we should focus on designing better environments rather than trying to design better people. Now, this isn't about blaming your environment for your choices. It's about empowering you to take control of your surroundings. By intentionally setting up your space to support your goals, you make the good habits easier and the bad habits harder. You reduce the constant need for heroic willpower because the environment itself is nudging you in the right direction.
I like that framing. Shifting the battleground from sheer internal willpower, which, fluctuates, to smart environmental design. That feels much more sustainable. Okay, strategy 3. This feels like a big one for social situations, developing assertive communication and strong boundaries. How do we actually say no effectively, especially to people we like, without causing a huge drama?
It really is a skill, isn't it? And it requires practice. Securely attached individuals often model this well. The book Attached gives the example of Tanya. She just knew intuitively when a potential partner wasn't right for her because their behavior was inconsistent or dismissive, like waiting too long to call back. She saw game playing as a deal breaker. Importantly, she attributed their behavior to their issues, their inability to be responsive, not to her own lack of worth. That's clear boundary setting based on self-respect. Her value wasn't dependent on their actions. Translating this to resisting relapse pressure, it might sound like a simple, direct statement. Thanks for the offer, but I'm not drinking tonight. I'm focusing on feeling good tomorrow. It's clear. It states your reason briefly, if you choose to, but it's not hostile or judgmental.
Right. It's not about making them feel bad for their choice. It's about clearly stating and protecting your choice and your well-being. It's owning it.
Exactly. And sometimes, even with the best intentions, conflict might arise. Someone might push back. Daniel Goleman offers great advice in Emotional Intelligence for de-escalating. He suggests things like validating the other person's feeling, even if you don't agree with their request. I can see you're disappointed, or I ache that you want me to join in. Maybe taking responsibility if you genuinely messed up, or apologizing if needed. This can help maintain the relationship while you still hold your boundary firm. For instance, look, I know you're just being generous offering me that cake, and I really appreciate the thought, truly. But I've made a commitment to myself about sugar right now. You acknowledge their intention while restating your position. And as Attached also points out, in healthy relationships, even during disagreements, there's an underlying concern for your well-being and a willingness to respect your needs. It's about finding that balance, standing firm, gently but clearly, while showing you still value the connection.
Okay, this leads us to our final strategy, which feels like it ties everything together. Cultivating conscious awareness and using pre-commitment. This sounds like being proactive, using our thinking brain to outsmart those automatic reactions.
That's precisely it. Daniel Goldman explains how our amygdala, the brain's emotional hub, can store these rapid response memories and reactions. We can act them out without quite realizing why. There's this sort of emotional shortcut where sensory information can zip straight to the amygdala, triggering a reaction before our thinking brain, the neocortex, has even fully processed what's going on. It's our brain's quick-draw alert system. And think back to Pavlov's dogs. His work on conditioned reflexes showed just how deep these automatic responses can run. He even found that reflexes that seemed extinguished, no longer reliably producing the response, could suddenly reappear or spontaneously regenerate under the right conditions. This tells us just how persistent these learned associations can be, lying dormant, just waiting for the right trigger.
So even if we've successfully quit something for ages, that underlying conditioning might still be lurking, ready to pop up when we least expect it. That really underscores why relying solely on willpower feels so risky.
Exactly, and that's why conscious awareness is so incredibly vital. William James, often called the father of American psychology, wrote beautifully about attention. He said attention can reveal feelings and thoughts that were already there, just in an unconscious state. By deliberately paying attention to our environment, to the subtle physical sensations of a craving starting, to the thoughts swirling around it, we can bring these unconscious drivers into the light. We can gain some agency over them. It's about noticing the first flicker of temptation, the slight shift in mood, before it becomes an overwhelming urge or an automatic yes. Maybe involves mindfulness or just pausing to ask, wait, what am I really feeling? What's behind this urge right now?
And once we have that awareness, once we see the pattern starting, then we can deploy those proactive strategies like pre-commitment.
Yes. Pre-commitment is a fantastic practical tool. One approach, mentioned in the 5 psychological truths, is to write the criteria for decisions before you see the options. So before you walk into that potentially triggering party, decide in advance exactly what your boundaries are. I will drink only sparkling water. I will have 1 plate of food. I will leave by 10:30 p.m. Maybe even text this plan to a supportive friend. Writing it down or saying it out loud creates a psychological barrier. It makes it harder for the in-the-moment pressures, the social proof, the liking, the offer you feel obligated to accept to sway you from your plan. Another powerful technique is the pre-mortem. Imagine your plan failed. Imagine you did relapse at the event. Now work backwards. Why did it fail? What specific trigger got you? What social pressure worked? What thought process led you astray? By identifying these potential failure points beforehand, you can design specific safeguards now to prevent them. Maybe it's planning an escape route, having a canned response ready for certain offers, or arranging to check in with a friend mid-event. This whole proactive approach turns potential weak spots into areas where you have a prepared, robust defense. You're anticipating the challenge, not just hoping you'll be strong enough when it hits.
We have covered so much valuable ground today, really digging into Cialdini's principles, especially that powerful trio of social proof, liking, and authority, plus reciprocation, and seeing how they intersect with our internal drive for consistency and our struggle with cognitive dissonance. But more importantly, we've laid out some really concrete, actionable strategies for building that psychological shield. Things like reframing your internal narrative, really embracing a growth identity, taking control of your environment, learning to communicate assertively and set clear boundaries, and finally cultivating that conscious awareness and using smart pre-commitment tactics.
Absolutely. And the goal of this deep dive really wasn't just about understanding manipulation or influence tactics. It's fundamentally about empowerment. It's about giving you, the listener, practical tools. Tools to protect your choices, safeguard your well-being, and hold on to the positive changes you've worked so incredibly hard to make. It's about shifting from feeling passively swayed by these forces, whether internal or external, to becoming an active, conscious participant in shaping your own behavior and your own life. You really do have a comprehensive toolkit now.
So here's something to think about as we wrap up. Skinner talked about how society often uses influence, sometimes even aversive control, shaping behavior by making us want to avoid negative outcomes to get us to conform. Given that, what kind of incredible power do you unlock when you consciously decide to design your own environment, your own social interactions, to actively reinforce the person you choose to be? What freedom comes not just from escaping what you don't want, but from actively building the conditions, the contingencies, as Skinner might say, that support your authentic self and your chosen path. The choice ultimately is yours, to actively create the world that supports the you want to be.